China has a plan, but we don't have a plan. We don't have a whole of nation plan for dealing with China. And when our allies start to think that maybe they can't count on us, like Saudi Arabia, enormous spending under Joe Biden. Discretionary spending is up 40%. We have a $31 trillion debt. That's not sustainable.
Are you concerned that because of these deals, that the U.S. dollar is going to come to this, go to this, is it going to get pushed to the sideline?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the latest deal with China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran?
I think it's indicative of the risk of China. So what I say in the book, Superpower in Peril, is China has a plan, but we don't have a plan. We don't have a whole of nation plan for dealing with China. And there's two real pieces to the plan, which we can talk about in detail. But one piece is you got to go to the gym. We got to get strong at home. We got to build our muscle by educating our people. We got to build our muscle by ensuring we have technological leadership. We're losing that, as I said before. We got to build our muscle by getting our institutions back on track. So we got to fix it at home. We can't blame the Chinese for the fact that we've got a lot of decay here at home. We can blame ourselves. At the same thing, we are facing an existential threat from China. China is a techno-authoritarian state that's on the rise. It's on the march, and it's taking leadership around the world. It's trying to impose its way of governance. It's trying to advance its national security interests in the South China Sea and elsewhere. The partnership with Putin is a great example of that. It's trying to exercise its authority as one of the biggest economies in the world, and partnerships that go against U.S. interests, as the one you just described with Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that's a direct byproduct of two things. One, we don't have a plan. And two, we have very weak leadership in our White House. And so one of the things that compelled me to run, I was writing this book, and the Afghanistan debacle and the weakness we saw from Joe Biden, to me, was sickening. It left me sick to my stomach to see those service members die because of that incompetence, to see the Afghan folks dropping out of the airplanes. I mean, it was just an American humiliation on the global stage. But what's happened since then are one thing after another, which I think has suggested weakness, slowness to react. You saw that with Ukraine and the support of Nord Stream 2, the pipeline, which was an invitation to Putin that we've got a weak leader here. We saw it in the response to the Chinese spy balloon. So when the world perceives that we've got weak leadership in the White House, that's opportunity for others, and China's filling that gap. And when our allies start to think that maybe they can't count on us, like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a stalwart ally. I was in the original Gulf War, which was to protect Saudi Arabia, those oil fields. I mean, that alliance has been with us for 100 years, and for the last few decades has been critical. But Saudi Arabia, I think, rightly feels like they can't count on the United States. And when you start to lose trust in the strength and reliability of the United States, you look for other partnerships. China's standing right there saying, hey, we can be your new friend.
How about the world's currency? Are you concerned that because of these deals that the U.S. dollar is going to come to this, go to this, is it going to get pushed to the sideline?
Yeah. Well, the thing about the U.S. dollar, it's a huge advantage to be the reserve currency. We are the reserve currency, so everybody wants, when times of crisis, to go to the dollar. That gives us the ability to fund things. That gives us the ability to draw capital that's unique. And the reason people believe in the dollar is the strength of the U.S. economy. They believe that all things being equal, that the United States is the safest place in the world. So when you have the kind of economic policy we've had, particularly over the last 2 years, that starts to shake the confidence of the world in the dollar and the U.S. economy. So there's two pieces to that. One is we've had more than a decade of prolonged low interest rates. It's persisted under the Biden administration when there was lots of reason to raise interest rates, but they've kept interest rates really low. And that makes money really cheap. And when people have cheap money, they invest in some ways that are risky. The second thing that's happened, that cheap money has been, that what's gone along with that is enormous spending under Joe Biden. Discretionary spending is up 40%. We have a $31 trillion debt. That's not sustainable. And so that has been the root cause of inflation. Inflation then has to be met with a raise in interest rates, which is making the economy, putting the economy at risk. Those bad policies, that excessive spending, the re-engineering of our economy in pursuit of a green agenda through the Infrastructure Act, through the Inflation Reduction Act, which did everything but reduce inflation, it added to inflation. Those things are the things that undermine the power of the dollar and the strength of the dollar. And so when I say we got to go to the gym, we got to get our house in order. If we have our house in order, it doesn't on economic terms, it doesn't matter what the Chinese do. We are going to be the economic powerhouse in the world. But the fact that we're not right now and that we're weak is creating an opportunity for the Chinese and others.
How close are we to getting pushed to the sideline? I mean, if you watch the news, it seems like it could happen at any minute. But the news is very fear-based on both sides. What is your insight into how close we are to losing?
Well, as I say in Superpower in Peril, I think we're in a very precarious spot. We are in peril, but we have time. And you know this from your time in the military or your time in bar fights or whatever it is. Sometimes the biggest guy has some weaknesses. China has some weaknesses. They have some huge strengths, but they have some real weaknesses. The weaknesses are that that they have an authoritarian model, and an authoritarian model requires the ability to continue to keep a cap on people, and they have an economy that's state allocation of capital. That state allocation of capital is advantageous in some ways for the technology leadership that I mentioned earlier. So it's given them a benefit in the near term, but it also creates huge risk in the long term because the government can never allocate capital as well as the private sector. And they've got a huge demographic problem. So, they're not growing. They have a huge aging population, and their birth rates are such that ultimately they're going to have far more older Chinese than up-and-coming Chinese, which is a key driver of growth and productivity. So part of this is creating the economic juggernaut in America that can compete into the decades ahead, and they have a system that will struggle. I think President Xi sees that. He's a smart guy. He sees that. He also sees this as a moment of American weakness, and that's why he is moving as aggressively as he is to establish China's leadership in the world and these partnerships. So to answer your question, I think there's time if we act now and act decisively, and that's why this 2024 cycle for the president and for control of the majority in the House and Senate is so critical, because on the current path, we're going to lose the moment. We're going to lose America's leadership in the world. That's why we are in peril. But if we course correct in the coming couple of years, there's a clear path to taking leadership again.
So we have a couple of years. All right.
Yeah, I hope so.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.